Welcome back to Database DevOps from start to finish. Right now, we are in the Building a New Database section, and this lesson, we're going to be creating the tables for our new database. So let's go right back over to Visual Studio, and we're going to right-click on the Tables folder and say Add Table. And let's give us all of the different types we could use. Notice there's a lot of different things for SQL Server in here. So triggers, unique keys, views, spatial indexes, and all the rest. But we're going to concentrate on the table right now. And our first table is going to be called person. Now this is the person DB. We haven't really talked through too much about what this is going to do. So let's do that as we look at this first table that's going to be created. So our person database is going to track information about people. And it's going to be really simple because this is a demo application. So it's going to have information about a person, about their phone numbers, and it's going to have a list of locations and then when or if that person has visited that location. So that's all it's going to have in this database. We're going to create about 4 tables today. So our first one is going to be the person table, and it starts off right away with an ID column as a primary key. Now, as we talked about in the SQL database course, I really recommend that you keep the primary key to be an integer, an auto-incrementing integer. And the reason why, and this is the same thing that Microsoft recommends, is because it makes it very much easier for the system to insert new records into our table. It makes it just that much faster. So we're going to keep it as ID, we're going to keep it as an integer. It's a not null primary key. Now, if you notice in this designer, it's a little different than the SQL Server Management Studio designer. This looks familiar up here, the upper left-hand corner where we have the ID and the int. We have it says a drop down here, you can make a selection, and we have our other information. And normally we have down below a list of properties. We still have those in the properties window. And actually, let me unpin that because it makes it a little larger. Notice in here we can have our identity specification and double click this to set it to true, which will turn on identity increment and identity seed, which what that's going to do is allow us to have an auto incrementing column for our ID. Meaning, when you insert the first record without inserting anything for ID, it's going to put a value of 1 for that field. And the next record get a value of 2, and then 3, and then 4. The number isn't necessarily important. And in fact, you may find that the number skips whole sections. Whenever you restart a SQL Server, it's going to add about 1,000 to that ID number. And so you may find out that your ID is 1002 instead of 2. That's not a problem. The issue is not what that number is. And please, please, please do not try to force it to be a sequential number. It's going to be sequential, but if you were to get halfway through an insert and then not do that insert after all, you may notice that there is a gap in your numbers. Don't try and go back and fill that gap in. That's a no-no. But what this does is it makes sure that you always have a number that is greater than the last number you inserted into your database, in the table. So this is how we do it in SSMS, where we double-click here, it changes this to true, and now it's an auto-incrementing number. But notice down here we have this new section called T-SQL. And this shows us the actual T-SQL command that we run to create this table. And what it did is it actually modified here, and it said added this identity text at the end of our primary key line. So this is the equivalent of going over to properties for this row, finding identity specification, expanding it out, and double-clicking this to be true. That's the equivalent. But notice how much easier it is to come down here and type identity, if I can spell. And it's the same thing. And if you come back over here, let's select our row again, come back over here to properties, go to identity specification, and notice it's true again. That's because all 3 of these, the properties, this visual representation at the top, and this T-SQL at the bottom, they're all linked together. if you make a change in one place, it changes everywhere. I have found that really helpful for making tweaks in different spots depending on what it is. So normally I like the very visual UI designer here, but then for that identity, it always irritated me how I had to go to properties down below. I had to scroll, I had to find the thing, expand the thing out, double click it, and then I had to have identity. Whereas now I can just come on down here and type it and be done. So it makes it quick for different tasks to be in different spots. And that's why everything is available to you on the screen at once. So this is a really nice way of modifying or creating a table very, very quickly. So I'm not going to come down here and type these things out normally. But if I wanted to, I could say first name, and let's call it an nvarchar. Let's go with 50 for right now and say not null. And notice up top that I have first name nvarchar 50 and it's not null. If I were to take off the not, notice that up top the check mark happens automatically. And same in reverse. So this allows me to do whatever I feel comfortable with. For example, if I just copy and paste this and change this to be last name, that really quickly created a new column for me without having to do a whole lot of work. So normally I'll create up here, but if I have something that's going to repeat itself or be pretty close to the same thing like first name and last name, I might drop down and do a copy paste and modify. And the designer will make sure that you don't make silly mistakes. So if I said non-varchar, it says, well, that's actually dbo.nonvarchar, which is a user-defined type. Well, that's not what I wanted. Now it does yell at me down here and says, has an unresolved reference to a built-in type non-varchar. So it would allow me to do this if I created the user-defined type for non-varchar. But when I look at it, I go, oh, wait, that's not non-varchar, it's nvarchar. And all of a sudden, all is good, and it knows what you're talking about. And if we do a drop down here, it's in the right spot on the list because it's actually using the SQL type of nvarchar. This also makes it easy when you come back and say, you know what, I think actually last name should be longer than that, make it 100, and all of a sudden now it's 100 up top without having to click in here and click again, and then mouse over and type like that. It just makes it a lot easier to come through and make modifications rather quickly. Okay, so let's build out the rest of this table. We're almost done. We're going to have date of birth, and that's going to be a date time 2. And we're going to make that not null. Notice down below it typed it out for me. And then lastly, we're going to have email address, and that's going to be an nvarchar. And let's make that 100. So this is our first table. We save that and we're done. So now we have a table definition. If we look at, let's drop right into File Explorer and let's look at this person.sql that I created in the raw format. So we're going to say edit, open with Notepad. And Notepad++ says this is the actual thing that you're saving. It's the SQL statement. That's all it is. Also note that if you're the SQL developer, but you have a DBA that's actually going to run these scripts, this isn't anything specific to Visual Studio. It's not like your DBA has to know about Visual Studio at all. This script right here is very clear. You can just copy this and run it inside SSMS, and it will create a table for you. So there's no special sauce going into creating these objects. They're just SQL files. It's just that when we view them, we can have this nice designer up top, and we can even make some modifications on the right as well. So I can right click and say add a foreign key. I can come here to properties for this key, and I can make modifications such as changing the name if I wanted to, and all the rest. So there's a lot of stuff you can do in here, but at its root, it's just a SQL script. Now we have a few more tables to create, so let's right click and add new table. I'll go a little faster now that we've talked through things. Phone number. So make this an identity. If I can spell it right. Wow. Tim did not spell it right at all. There we go. And now we'll have the phone number itself. And that we're going to make an nvarchar. We'll leave it at 50. I'll modify it later. And we're also going to have a person ID. It's going to link to the person who owns this phone number. And then finally, we're going to have a field called primary number. And that's going to be a bit with a default value of 0. Okay, so there's my table. I did want to modify this phone number. The phone number should be no more than, let's say 20. Just on the safe side. We hit save. We now have our table. Let's right click and add a new table. And this table is going to be called location. And again, identity. And then we'll have our location name. And that will be an nvarchar. 50 is fine, not null. And then we're going to have the actual location, which that's not the greatest of combinations there, location, name, and location. But the idea here is that we have the Statue of Liberty. And then location is New York City, New York. That would be the location name and the location. And I think that's probably it for that table. So we can save and close that. And finally, we have our last table, which is going to be called, let's call it location visit. And we'll make this a identity. And this is going to be really simple. It's going to be the person ID, an int, and the location ID, int. And then the visit date, date time 2. And this table, let's talk through what all these tables actually are doing. So the person table holds people, pretty simple stuff. The phone number table holds one or more phone numbers per person. So you can have, this is a one-to-many relationship. So notice you can have a person ID, you do have a person ID associated with each phone number. So myself, I can have 2, 3, or 4 phone numbers, however many I want. And then I have one marked as the primary phone number to reach me at. So really simple. It doesn't have anything like, is it a, what's the name of the location or name of phone number? So there's no work versus personal versus cell or anything like that. It's all just, here's a phone number list for Tim, and this is the primary number to reach him at. That's all it is. So that is our phone number table. And then we have a location table, which is going to identify various locations across the globe that people have visited or would like to visit. And so you'll have important sites here, Mount Rushmore, the Statue of Liberty, maybe the Golden Gate Bridge. These are all, of course, U.S. locations. There are other locations across the world that maybe we want to add. So once you have this list of locations, then people can say, yes, I just went to visit the Golden Gate Bridge. And so that's this table right here, location visit, where we say this person, maybe ID 1 for Tim, visited ID 3, meaning the Golden Gate Bridge, and the date of visit was March 15th. So that's the many-to-many relationship, meaning I can visit many locations and many people can visit a location. That's the many-to-many relationship. So you have a one-to-many relationship between person and phone number, and we have a many-to-many relationship between locations and people. So let's represent this with foreign keys. So let's go to our phone number table first. I'm going to right-click on foreign keys and say Add New Foreign Key. And the foreign key is phone number, and the to table, let's call this is just the name of it right now, but let's call this the person. So it creates for us a foreign key, and then right down here it puts the actual values, which makes it very easy to fill in the blanks essentially. So the first one is, what column are we talking about? And that column would be the person ID. That references the person table, and it references the ID column. And notice all the red squigglies go away. And that's because it understands that the person table exists and what values are in that person table. So we have the person ID, which is this right here, this person ID. That's the ID that's a foreign key for a primary key. So the foreign key is on person ID, and that references the person table and the ID column. Notice how easy it was to create this foreign key. I just right-clicked on foreign keys and said Add. I named it, and then that's the name right here. And then it generated for me the SQL statement that I just filled in the blanks for. Let's do that again with our many-to-many relationship. So we can go over to location visit, where we have two foreign keys. So let's right-click on foreign key, say Add New Foreign Key. That's going to be to the person table. And the column is going to be the ID column. So let's start with the person ID, references the person table, and the column is ID. I have one more, so right-click on foreign keys, add new foreign key, and this one goes to the location. And so we have the location ID, and that goes to the location table and the ID column. Now notice location is a keyword. So I have to put that in square brackets. And now we're good to go. So if you have that problem where it turns blue, then you go, oh, that must be a keyword. No problem. You put it in square brackets, and now it knows that it's indicating the table, not that keyword. So now I have two foreign keys on this table, and we're all set. So now we've built all of our tables. Now, we're not going to publish this to a database yet. We're going to get to that after you get through the other objects that we need to get created. But for now, this is all we need for our four tables and their foreign keys.